The last one we're going to talk about is a sestina. So a sestina, we have 6 stanzas, 6 lines. So we're going to end up with 36 lines total, each followed by a 3-line conclusion or envoy. So the sestina requires a strict pattern of repetition of 6 key words that end the line of the first stanza. Makes perfect sense? Let's actually look at one and maybe that'll help you see what a sestina is all about. So we're going to look at this sestina by Elizabeth Bishop. So we do see the six line stanzas, and then we get that 3-line ending. Now, if you want, you can go ahead and read through this, or we can go through it together here. We start with the repetition of 6 words throughout. The first one we're going to look at is house. Now you'll notice that house is repeated in each stanza, but it's in a different place each time. To me, this is kind of like a Sudoku where you have different numbers on each line, but they're the same numbers. We get this same type of structure here within a sestina. So you'll notice that this continues throughout the poem. Not only is house used at the end of a line in each stanza, but also grandmother, child, stove, almanac, and tears are used. And they're also in a different place in each stanza. So you can see how difficult a sestina would be to write, but we do get a good example of a sestina here. And then we see those 6 words also used in that final stanza, the final 3 lines here. We have tears, we have almanac, grandmother, stove, child, and house. So this is an extremely difficult form to look at, but I want you to read through this and see how even though there is this tight structure, there is meaning and there is a good message throughout this poem. September rain falls on the house in the failing light. The old grandmother sits in the kitchen with the child beside the little marble stove, reading the jokes from the almanac, laughing and talking to hide her tears. She thinks they're equinoctial tears, and the rain that beats on the roof of the house were both foretold by the almanac, but only known to her grandmother. The iron kettle sings on the stove. She cuts some bread and says to the child, "It's time for tea now." But the child is watching the tea kettle's small white tears dance like mad on the hot black stove, the way the rain must dance in the house. Hiding up, the old grandmother hangs up the clever almanac on its spoon. Bird-like, the almanac hovers, half open above the child, hovers above the old grandmother, and her teacup full of dark brown tears. She shivers and says she thinks the house feels chilly and puts more wood in the stove. It was to be, says the marble stove. I know what I know, says the almanac. With crayons, the child draws a rigid house and a winding pathway. Then the child puts in a man with buttons like tears and shows it proudly to the grandmother. But secretly, while the grandmother busies herself about the stove, the little moons fall down like tears from between the pages of the almanac into the flower bed the child has carefully placed in the front of the house. Time to plant tears, says the almanac. The grandmother sings to the marvelous stove, and the child draws another inscrutable house. You can see some of the techniques that Bishop uses to not make the poem seem too contrived with the same words at the ending of each line. Now we can see, for example, in moving from the second to the third stanza, she says to the child and then continues that thought into that next stanza. So these lines are being blended. So we see some of that enjambment being used. We also see that certain words are represented in different ways, like tears. So we have a teacup full of dark brown tears. We have the buttons that look like tears. We have her actual tears in the first stanza. So you can see how difficult such a poem would be to write, but we do see this moment of a grandmother playing with the child, and maybe the grandmother is reminiscing on her own life and her own loss of childhood. Maybe she just is enjoying being there with the child. I'm going to leave this one a little bit more open for you to interpret. See what kind of meaning you can get out of this poem. Hopefully you enjoyed these poems, and feel free to reread them and maybe get different symbols, different meanings out of them as you go through them a second or a third time.